Hello, and welcome to the Engineering Influence podcast brought to you by the American Council of Engineering Companies. My name is Thomas Grogan, Senior Director, Economics and Market Intelligence here at ACEC, and I'm very happy today to be joined by Vidhu Shekhar, Government Strategy Leader, U.S. State and Local Government at Microsoft. Vidhu, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Thomas.
Well, why don't we just get started with you introducing yourself to our audience and tell them all a little bit about what you do at Microsoft.
So I always joke with people that I perhaps have the second best job at Microsoft.
Okay.
The best job, of course, is the CEO's.
Yeah, definitely.
In sort of comparison, I get to work with a lot of our government customers and the extended partner ecosystem that serves those customers, trying to solve some real-world problems that make differences on the benefits people receive, on the roads we travel on the bridges we traverse, and responding to emergencies. And so in that, what I get to do is bring the core of our mission, which is empowering every single person and organization in the world to do more with technology. I am very lucky to be able to bring to bear a lot of our partners, including some of your member companies, in solving these real-world problems.
Yeah.
So my role really is focused on how do we draw up strategies collectively and then focus on the mission that the customer has in serving the residents.
Yeah. So, you talk about this ecosystem you're working in, and it's big, it's complicated, so I'm sure we'll touch on a few different parts of that whole ecosystem. Let's start first with the clients, right? Who are your clients, the end customers who are responsible for this infrastructure? In 2025, what are some of the challenges that they're facing that you and your AEC partners are helping them solve?
I don't think it's any surprise. Over the last several years, there's a massive push in rebuilding infrastructure within the U.S. The bipartisan infrastructure law was a big impetus and brought a lot of funding, right? And as we look at the landscape of infrastructure within the country, the key focus becomes where do we build new things? Where do we help rejuvenate infrastructure that's been around for decades and in often cases is crumbling?
Yeah.
And so in working with our AEC partners, really the conversation starts early, right? We've come into this era where computer-aided design is ubiquitous, right? I remember back when in my undergrad days, there was this terminology for BIM software that was just developing. Right? And now we have 3D models, digital twins, all of this as the start of this conversation, right? And of course, behind that is the power of cloud computing, which is where Microsoft plays a very significant role in bringing to bear those compute resources, as well as artificial intelligence resources, so that you can build out multiple scenarios of a particular infrastructure project even before having embarked on that journey. And so that's just one of the examples where we're starting off. The second piece that I think I'm very excited about, and if folks are going to be at the TRB Technology Conference in May, we'll be doing a little panel discussion on this, is virtual inspections. And again, extended that concept, inspections is a very, very manual and time-consuming effort when it comes to infrastructure. And imagine if you're on a floating bridge. It just complicates things just a tad bit more.
Right.
And so we've done a very exciting pilot project with University of Washington and WashDOT, including some of the AEC partners that are in your membership, as well as other software providers.
Yeah.
And so that would be a very exciting way to show the impact sort of at the end stage of maintaining an infrastructure.
Right. So you're spanning kind of the whole life cycle. You talk about the scenario planning in the beginning, and I'm sure the cost savings that exist today by being able to do 15 different scenario plans very quickly, go over it with your client, figure out what the right one is to implement all the way through. Now we've built the bridge power system. How are we optimizing the operation and maintenance of that piece, which you talk
Right.
about,
Absolutely.
with this inspection, or maybe it's still monitoring, that has changed a lot, even in the past 10 years, let alone 25 years from now.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And for the AEC firms that, you're working with, how do they partner with Microsoft on some of these technology solutions? You mentioned the cloud computing, the AI technologies. How do they, work together with you on delivering some of these infrastructure projects?
That's a very good question. And one thing I think we've all realized is every single company now is a technology company.
Right.
Right? Irrespective of the sub-segment you serve.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're in financial services, right? Let's take Visa or a MasterCard.
Mm-hmm.
They have a massive technology footprint.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, in the context of AEC firms, there is a massive amount of technology powering that entire operation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And making sure that they are able to project on plans, bid on plans much more efficiently, build out things much more efficiently, have a safety first culture on those work sites, and then, of course, in the operations and maintenance. And so as we kind of think about it, right, there's sort of that back office technology components. You have your planning software, all of those components. All of that needs to reside somewhere. And of course, the world's most popular financial system is Microsoft Excel.
Yeah,
And
Excel is really that lowest common denominator that you could spend all your time learning many different tools, but ultimately you get your data into Excel to get it into PowerPoint to show your trend lines and scenario planning, and that hasn't changed much over the past
and that
few
goes to the
decades.
core of productivity.
Right.
Right? And so as we kind of think about it, the first step we always start with, which is sort of boring and mundane, but it's day-to-day productivity software, right? And that's where is the first step we can collaborate together. The second piece is, what is the specific line of business software that an AEC firm has, either specific to forecasting their bid estimates or work order management, right? And being able to then work with them to rebuild that software with an AI-enabled approach so that they can bring the knowledge that they have over the past several decades, or in some cases more than a century's worth of institutional knowledge, and bring it to the fingertips of a brand new engineer coming out of college, right? And providing them some sort of a co-pilot that gives this brand new engineer the power of the institutional knowledge for the past several decades.
Right.
And we've seen this be very successful with several of your member companies.
Yeah.
And I think the last but not the least is, well, most infrastructure projects are sort of build, operate, and transfer. And when the asset gets transferred back to the government, there is suddenly this vacuum of data because it was the AEC firm that did all the work that typically then takes it and goes to the next project. And this is where, again, technology through interoperability via a data lake or like can provide that bridging effect.
Yeah.
Right, where it is a seamless transfer over to governments. And in some cases, we are partnering with AEC firms to make sure that they can start using government technology assets from the get-go.
Yeah.
So that there is no vacuum when there is a transition.
Right. And so, I think this talk of a vacuum brings up an interesting point and challenge that the industry is facing right now with respect to technology. Some of it is around the nature of projects, and you work on a project and you get a lot of data, and then there's who owns the data. Does it get transferred? You talked a bit about these AI-aided designs or tools, which are all built on data to become smarter. Are you seeing challenges on the procurement client side that are restricting the ability of using these tools, or other, say, hurdles that companies might encounter? Because in theory, an AI-aided solution is great. The reality of having all these different players, stakeholders, contracts, one piece of the puzzle might not allow for a certain data collection methodology or information presented in a certain format, things like that. Is that kind of getting worked on, still in the early stages? How are you seeing
Do you have
that?
like 4 hours left in the podcast?
I don't know. How much time do we have?
It is a complex question.
Right.
And I'll sort of take this back to the core of data privacy laws around the country.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think that's where the conversation needs to start.
Okay.
As to what data is being collected, first of all, and who owns the data and who's the data steward. And in most cases in the public sector domain, well, the public owns the data, and the government is acting as a steward on behalf of the public. And what the AEC firms or any private company then does with that data should, in theory, come back and benefit the public good, right? And this is where I think the lack of certain data privacy laws, I think there's only 13 states across the union that have data privacy laws in place, makes it difficult for us to have that very transparent conversation.
Yeah.
A lot of conversations at the national level have been, does it make sense for a cohesive data platform for interoperability? We've seen this happen very successfully in the health and human services space.
Okay.
Right? And that could be a model. And certainly there's entities working at the USDOT level to explore what this would look like. That, I think, in effect, is going to help inform what sort of procurement language needs to be in place.
Okay.
Right? And, if there is that availability of data up front, the life cycle from that point in terms of who owns the data, and if that remains in the public domain, well, there could be multiple copies. And open data laws across the country have really helped improve access to this kind of data, right? And so this would just become another data type, perhaps made available through geospatial mapping tools or otherwise, for even citizen developers to be able to take that and say, hey, we've been experiencing a lot of issues crossing this particular intersection. Let's leverage what I, citizen know, and let's propose something to the DOT. And that can evolve into a project of its own, right? But that's where I think there's the power of the data to help not only the AEC firms be able to have well thought through and structured plans on addressing a project, but really creating that data life cycle that then a citizen developer can kind of go and help inform the plans of the government.
Yeah, I like how, you bring up data privacy laws, and depending on what metrics or rubrics you're looking at, certain states or things like GDPR might be more advanced, this or that. Are there other, let's say, federal policies or laws that you are tracking with relation to AI and other tech development that, you have thoughts on that you think will be impactful that our members should also, be aware of that's happening?
I would say the two that are sort of top of mind for me right now. And one, because, then this is the AI action plan that the White House is putting together.
Yes.
OSTP just wrapped up the RFI for the AI action plan. And we, as Microsoft, presented our point of view into what that American AI looks like, keeping innovation at the forefront while promoting research and safety along the way, right? And to be very, very focused on both the technology as well as the workforce. I think the AI action plan is going to be very important for all of the AEC firms to take a look at. Because this is going to be the one way, as I was saying before, every company has become a technology company. And this provides a way to partner with not just the federal government, but also all of the state governments and local governments in terms of being able to leverage AI in infrastructure projects, right? So that's one that's top of mind. The second one is, of course, the Surface Reauthorization Bill, right? And as you know and probably remember, in the bipartisan infrastructure law, there wasn't really a carve-out for technology spend on infrastructure projects.
Okay.
And anecdotally, what I've heard is like, FAA, if they get a grant, there is about 15% of that grant monies that can be devoted towards technology. But when we look at the same thing for surface infrastructure, I would hazard guessing that number for technology is 0.0001%.
Yeah.
Right? So by comparison, there is already a very stark contrast in the amount of investments that come through on technology. And the fact that technology has become such a core component of infrastructure delivery now, that we need to fundamentally rethink what that is.
Yeah. I mean, is some of the challenge, as you brought up and, started with your point that every firm is a technology firm, if technology is so embedded in certain processes or day-to-day activities, it almost maybe is there but is not getting captured? Or, I mean, is that a challenge that you see? Or like, do we need to have such a carve out or specification of, for $1, 10 cents is allocated for technology, 15 cents is for materials, 20 cents is overhead? Like,
in my limited experience, right, what I've seen is unless it is in the policy,
okay,
at the federal level,
okay,
it does not trickle down,
okay,
to the other local and state governments. And when people apply for NOFOs, like they all do, right, whether formula or competitive grants, they go back to the eligibility criteria as defined in the policy.
Right.
Which is why I think it's important for us to address this at perhaps the level of the Congress and make sure that the policy has a carve-out specific to this.
Got it.
Right? And making sure that, yes, we identify a carve-out for technology without perhaps necessarily specifying at a very detailed level, to your point, right? Giving the AEC firms, giving other, NOFO recipients the flexibility to think about how they want to leverage this bucket of money, right? But I do think that it is very important for us to codify it in the policy documentation.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And so, when we were talking a little bit just before that on regulation and policy, you brought up technology and then workforce. Workforce is a very big issue for the AEC industry for a variety of reasons, right? How do you or Microsoft think about workforce development, enabling, the folks who are going to be the engineers of the future today? What can we do to ensure that continuity? Some of the stuff, folks who are retiring, you're losing a lot of knowledge when they leave the workforce. There's concerns that AI will weaken the cognitive development of folks. When they're younger, they'll be too dependent on tools. How are you thinking about all of that?
Well, let me start by sharing a very personal experience. I have two young daughters, 7 and 6. And, a couple of years ago, 875 days ago, it's my counter for the days since ChatGPT has been launched.
Okay.
I authored a book, and I wrote about, generative AI use cases in state and local governments.
Okay.
And of course, they were a little bit younger, and when the author copies arrived, they're like, "Oh, Dad, you wrote a book." And they opened it, and it was all full of text and no images. And so they were very disappointed. But in order to address their disappointment, I said, "Hey, look, why don't we go into, Bing Chat and see if it can take some of the language in my book and create some fun images for you." And we did that. And that afternoon exercise created this creative burst in my daughters where they were like, "Okay, well, maybe I can write a story and you can make it into a book."
Yeah.
That goes to the core, in my belief, is how we address education in this new era of AI.
Okay.
Right? Where I think we have to continue working on, to your point, the cognitive abilities while augmenting them with AI.
Yeah.
And leveraging AI perhaps as a teacher's aid, if you will,
right,
to create customized learning paths for our students. And that's at the very young K through 12 kind of age group. I've also seen and heard firsthand major universities, the Ivy League universities, the R10, R15 universities, they are all incorporating AI in some form in the delivery of content to their students. And it's across different segments. Civil engineering, all of the engineering, even in the arts, they have it. Of course, filmmaking has had that for a very long time.
Right.
And it's coming down into medicine as well.
Yeah.
The key, again, is how do we help push a student's ability and continue having them understand where AI can help fill in certain gaps in their education journey. But when we come to the professional workforce, the conversations becomes a little bit more complex.
Right.
Right? Because, of course, there's this fear that AI is going to take my job away. Right? And I don't think popular media has helped. I could go on and on about Skynet stories and why, there is always this fear of AI. But what we've learned at Microsoft that for us, it needs to be a partnership. And it goes back to some of our responsible AI principles, right? Where it is about the human in the loop and making sure that AI is a co-pilot and not an autopilot, right? And so for that lens, what we've done, and we did this in December of 2023, our vice chair, Brad Smith, in fact, kicked off a partnership with AFL-CIO.
Okay.
And this partnership is really focused on, one, identifying the impacts AI can have on the workforce. And then second, working collaboratively to create upskilling and reskilling programs to help address those impacts. And finally, be able to actually share that with the policymakers
Right.
so that they can have informed policymaking around workforce development in this new era of AI. And so as I kind of look at this cohesively, and I go back and sort of contextualize this for the AEC firms, right? We have always, in the last 2 decades at least, seen this massive shortage of qualified, skilled pipeline of workers coming into
Right.
AEC
Yeah.
firms, irrespective of the position, right? And I think that that's what we need to focus on is how do we fill the gap in that pipeline with AI being a co-pilot for the folks that are already in the pipeline.
Yeah, no, very well said. Well, Vidhu, we're getting towards the end of this podcast, but I guess I just wanted to, get your thoughts at a high level. What are you most optimistic or excited about in the AEC infrastructure space over the next 5, 10, 15 years with all these new developments and changes and, Microsoft continuing to partner with our member firms?
I don't know if I can crystal ball this thing to 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of big events here in the short term that I'm really excited about and would love to partner about. First and foremost, the World Cup next year.
Okay.
I think a lot of the AEC firms are super excited.
Yeah.
I am particularly excited because I'm a soccer fan.
Okay.
But I think this brings in massive opportunity for us to collectively showcase what we can do in terms of infrastructure development
Right.
to the rest of the world.
Okay.
The second big one, of course, is LA 28.
Right.
And again, I think the scale at which Olympic events happen and the impact they have on local infrastructure and economic development is amazing.
Yeah.
And I know several of the AEC firms are already engaged in the Southern California region.
Right.
And I would love to have this conversation around where we bring learnings from around the world, having as Microsoft first-hand experience in helping with the Olympics in different continents, as well as World Cups in different continents, right? And I think for once I feel really confident that technology is going to make a very positive impact, especially when we think about LA 28 being a transit-first Olympics.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think those are the couple of things that I'm very excited about. The last, and this is perhaps me being a Californian, we've had a lot of natural disasters. And I feel like in the last 5 years, there's been exponential growth in natural disasters, which brings us to the rebuilding process.
Yeah.
The process is often stymied by the long permitting times, and then just the whole process of construction, debris removal, all of that. What I am actually getting excited about is if I crystal ball to the next 10 years, the ability for AEC firms to be able to leverage perhaps drone technologies, other geospatial technologies, being able to predict certain things in terms of weather events, and be able to almost provide support to the government in recovery response in a way that really collapses the recovery time for our communities. And to me, that would actually be sort of the holy grail of our partnership between AEC firms, Microsoft as a technology company, and our government and communities.
Yeah, I know that nimbleness to be responsive is definitely a great opportunity there. Well, thank you very much. Well, who do you think will win the World Cup?
Oh, I am always biased towards Brazil.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go France, but hey, who knows?
Well, let's wager $1 and we'll see who wins.
Yes, in a few years we'll check back in. Well, Vidhu, thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank everyone for listening to our podcast today. And if you can, please like or subscribe to the Engineering Influence podcast on whatever media channel you are using.
Well, Thomas, thank you so much for having me. And
absolutely.
Thanks to ACEC for hosting this podcast.
All right, great. Thank you.